Hi, it's Penny Black and Jill Foster here for your next PB&J card class. And today I'm sharing the first of two videos demonstrating a no-line coloring technique with stamps from Penny Black's new collection, Celebrate. And here's a look at the card that we will be creating today. And I'm using Penny Black's Full of Glee stamp along with the Cutout Borders Creative Die and the Sentiment from Hope Shines. And there will be a full supply list at the very end of the video, and that will include the stamp number and names again, and also all of the other supplies I'm using to create my card. So to begin, I'm stamping onto Canson 140-pound watercolor paper, and I'm stamping this using my Misty stamp positioning tool. You certainly would not have to use this tool, but I find it's easier because I can work in small sections on the stamp. And I'm coloring onto my stamp using Tombow dual brush pens. I'm using the brush tip of the marker, and I'm first starting with the blue color to color the flowers. I've chosen these markers because they are water soluble, so when I start painting onto these flowers, it will help blur the outline of the flower image and give it that no line effect. If you were working on with just a regular acrylic block, you may find you need to lightly mist or huff onto the stamp before stamping it onto the watercolor paper just to get those inks reactivated. I really love this stamp. It has a lot of versatility just based on how you position it on the card. So today I'm going to stamp it multiple times sort of along the right hand side of the card to give it a different look. And here I'm just adding the green onto the leaves and the stems. So I went ahead and finished stamping that around that corner like I mentioned, and now I'm ready to do my painting and coloring. So I'm working here, my brush just has water on it, and it's not too much water. I dab off the excess onto a paper towel, and I'm just painting right over where I've stamped. And you will see that the outline will start to blur, and the blue color that you see at the beginning, that light blue, was just from what was stamped onto the paper. Now I'm going in and adding some shading. I'm using Distress Reinkers as watercolors, so I just put a little drop onto an acrylic block and I'm picking that up with the paintbrush. The color used here is Blueprint Sketch, and I just love the way that combines with the stamping that's on there. So there again, I just first added water to get that outline color moving, and now I'm adding the Blueprint Sketch Reinker used as a watercolor to add some shading. You'll see that I work kind of bouncing around the flower so that I'm never working on two petals that are touching each other. This one touches just a little bit in the corner, and the reason is that until that's dry, whenever you add that water, it will cause the outline to blend. So if you do two that are right next to each other, they'll just blend into each other and you'll have one giant petal left. And there again, adding that Blueprint Sketch as the shading towards the base of the petal. And you can go back, and if you want to lift some color like I'm doing here or blend some more, you can definitely go back in. Watercolors are very forgiving when you re-wet them and can do more blending. So once again, just adding water, and then now the Blueprint Sketch ink for some additional blending and shading. And I went ahead and worked my way around that flower, doing that for the petals that weren't touching. Then I added some heat from my heat gun to dry that so that I could go in and work on the petals that were touching. Now you still have to be careful because those areas that you've already painted will reactivate with that water, but not too much if they've been dried with the heat gun, or if you just are more patient than me and let them dry on their own. So then I follow the same process, and what I'm careful about is for petals that are touching each other, I'm just sure that if it's next to a light area, then I add more dark shading so that the petals don't all start looking like one petal. So you can see there I blended the color with water, and then when I put in that Blueprint Sketch, I put it next to the light area of the petal that was next to it. I hope that makes sense. Hopefully with the video it'll make more sense. So here I just blended with water on this petal and then added the shading. When in doubt, I just go light, dark, so that it looks nice and full. And some of the petals, like the one I just did previously, I just leave it light for some area. I didn't even add the Blueprint Sketch in. So I continued that on all of the flowers, and then for the leaves and the stems I did the same thing. I first wet the area, and now I'm using the peeled paint Distress Re-Inker used as a watercolor, putting that in and then blending it out. Now there wasn't a lot of stamping on the leaves, it's just the simple outline, so I did use more of the Re-Inker color to add the color onto the leaves. And then I'm just using water to blend that and kind of push that darker color down towards the base of the leaf. Now you could absolutely certainly stop there. I'm just adding here on the center. It's really easy. I'm just blending with water and leaving some areas of white so that it doesn't all become one blue center. And like I was saying before, you could easily stop there with your painting and not go back in any other details, but I like to fiddle around with the painting and my coloring. So you'll see here I will be grabbing some colored pencils, and I'm using Prismacolor pencils. I like how smooth the blending is with these, and I'm using a darker blue just down in some of these areas where I really wanted to deepen that shadow and differentiate between different petals. So if your watercolor gets a little out of control with you, you can go in and just add in some more of that outline and definition to the petals. What I find is this is a very easy step and doesn't take very long with that watercolor base already applied, but it really makes a difference in how lifelike the petals look. So I used a darker color, and now I'm using a medium shade, and I also like the brightness that this color adds. And all the exact colors are listed at the very end of the video. So with that medium shade, I'm just adding just a few little lines really, and then using a lighter color to go back and just blend that out. And this gives the petals a really smooth, soft look. It's also nice if you've missed adding a highlight, you can go back in with a very light colored pencil, even a white, and add it back in at the end. So I continued that on all of the flowers, and then I also did that for the leaves, and it was very handy to use the colored pencil to get in on the stems as well. A little bit more control with that than using a little paintbrush to do it. I'm just adding that with the darker color, and on the leaves and the stems I just use one colored pencil. So once that was done, I was ready to work on my background. Now when applying the paint and the water here on the background, I want to be really careful not to get too close to the flowers. You'll see there I did, and it starts to bleed. Remember, we stamped those with a water-soluble ink, so that will bleed out if you get it wet again. But like I showed there, watercolor's forgiving. If you put down the wrong color, like I just did, put blue instead of green, you can just dab it up with a paper towel and move on. Add some more water and keep going. That's one thing I really love about watercolors. You can fix your mistakes pretty easily if you get it while it's still wet. So here I'm just adding that peeled paint Distress Re-Inker used as a watercolor over on my acrylic block that's off camera. I am diluting that with water so that it's not too dark. I will put down a layer, usually put down a layer of water first, like I'm doing here, and then go back in and drop the color onto that. That just gives me more time to blend that while the area is still wet and helps it fade out, sort of fade out into white instead of having a harsh line where it starts and ends. By putting the water down first, it just buys a little bit more time to do the blending and the fading. So after I did the peeled paint on the background, I wanted a little touch of brightness to contrast with the blue. So here I'm using the Rusty Hinge, again a Distress Re-Inker used as a watercolor, just a little drop on my acrylic block off camera, and then diluted with water and applying to the background. And you can go over and apply some of that over the green areas. Those two colors seem to mix really well. I didn't want it just to have that orange color only on the left-hand side of the flower, so there's a few places where I go back in and add that over the green just to help that color sort of move around on the page. So first water and then dropping in the color and then blending it out with water. When I go off camera, I'm just rinsing off my brush and dabbing it on the paper towel to remove any excess water. And I just continued doing that on the entire card front. Now to give this a little vintage look, I'm going to add some Gathered Twigs Distress ink. I'm using an ink blending tool and a foam pad. Just very light pressure going around the perimeter of the entire card. I think this just gives it an overall finished look. And get the edges as well. And to finish things off, I'm stamping my sentiment. I'm using Ranger Archival ink in the color of potting soil. I am doing this in my stamp positioning tool just so I can get some repeated impressions because I am stamping on the watercolor paper. It has some texture to it, and this helps me to get a really good impression. And I mounted that to my note card, and here's a look at that finished card. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also connect with Penny Black on Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, Instagram, and on our website, and I will link to all of those down in the YouTube description box below. And as promised, here's the list of all the supplies used in creating today's card.